My wife said she wanted a divorce like she noted almond milk. So I left with a clean exit strategy, exposed her games, and reclaimed my life, finally. I want a divorce. She said it the same way she tells me we're out of almond milk. No build-up, no tears, just standing there in my doorway in her goddamn lemon joggers, holding her phone like she was mid-text, and suddenly remembered to end our 19-year marriage. I looked up from my coffee, blinked once, and smiled. Not a sarcastic smirk, not a fake grin, just a calm, quiet smile. That sounds good, dear. Her eyebrows twitched, just barely. A normal person wouldn't have noticed, but after nearly 2 decades of reading her every passive-aggressive breath, I caught it like a strobe light. That twitch was the sound of her script tearing in half. She expected resistance, drama, a pathetic plea for mercy. She'd probably rehearsed it in the mirror the night before, practiced her wounded sigh, maybe even watched a few divorce TikToks for inspiration. But I didn't ask why, I didn't ask who, I didn't even flinch. I sipped my coffee and went back to reading the financial section, like she just informed me the neighbor's dog died. She lingered in the doorway, like I was supposed to chase her, like she was waiting for me to detonate. Instead, I stood up, rinsed my mug in the sink, and said, "So, we'll keep it clean. No lawyers if we don't need them. You can keep the Tesla. I'll grab my things this weekend." She opened her mouth, closed it again. "Wait, just like that?" she asked finally, tilting her head. I shrugged. "You're not the first person to quit on me this year." That one landed. She frowned, like I'd spoken in code. And maybe I had, because no, she wasn't the first. My business partner bailed in January. My brother stopped talking to me after Dad's will. Hell, even my barber moved to Scottsdale. But unlike her, none of them tried to play chess with a man who'd already burned the board. She stood there too long enough to look uncertain, and that was new. Alyssa is never uncertain. She always has a plan, a Pinterest board for every crisis. I used to joke she could organize a funeral before the body hit the ground. Now she looked small, and I wasn't angry, not really. That was the part that rattled her most. My calmness felt like contempt, like she didn't even rate enough rage to throw a mug. So she grabbed her purse, forced a bright fake okay then, and left. But I saw it in her walk, the wobble of someone who expected to win a game that just got unplugged. And in that quiet, echoing house, I poured another cup of coffee, smiled again, and started writing my list. Not of regrets, of what I was about to do next. "So you just agreed?" Alyssa stabs her straw through the lid of her overpriced green smoothie like it personally offended her. "Didn't even flinch," she says. He said, and I quote, "That sounds good, dear. Dear Madison," like he was talking to a waitress. 3 women sit in a semicircle around her at the cafe, all in their post-yoga performance gear, pretending not to be delighted. Their eyes are hungry, though. You can smell it. Fresh gossip, still warm. Well, Madison offers cautiously, maybe he's in shock. He moved out 2 days later, packed everything. Didn't even take the TV. He just left like he had a damn exit strategy already drawn up. A moment of silence. Then Jessica, the messy divorce one of the group, leans in, eyes glittering. "Wait, are you sure you didn't know this was coming?" Alyssa narrows her eyes. "We weren't that bad." But even she hears the doubt in her voice. She tries to cover it with a sip of her drink, but the straw squeaks awkwardly against the ice, betraying her. "And now what?" asks Danielle, the one who still thinks therapy fixes everything. "He hasn't called, texted, tried to work things out." Alyssa shakes her head slowly. Not a word. No long messages, no late-night rants, no begging for one last talk. He didn't even ask about the cat. It's like he vaporized. And the worst part? People noticed. At first, Alyssa strutted around like she was finally free, told her friends it was amicable, said she was finally taking control. She liked the way it sounded, like she'd cut loose some dead weight and was ready for her second act. But now they're looking at her differently. Madison glances away, fiddling with her straw wrapper. Jessica's eyes flick with doubt. Danielle's doing that therapist head tilt again, the one that says, maybe it wasn't all him. And Alyssa feels it. The quiet shift, the suspicion that she didn't leave Paul. He let her go, and that's a whole different kind of humiliation. Back at home, she scrolls through his old Instagram. Nothing new. She opens Venmo, checks their shared payment history. He unsubscribed from Netflix. Just cut the cord like it was business. Even his Spotify stopped showing up on the family Alexa. He didn't fight. He vanished, cleanly, efficiently, like he'd been planning this for months. She lies in bed that night, phone on her chest, wondering what kind of man smiles at divorce and walks away without a bruise. The first thing that threw her off was the closet. Empty. Not messy, not half done, just empty. The drawers, too. Not a sock, not a cufflink, not even that ratty Notre Dame hoodie he wore every Sunday like it was sacred. Gone. All of it. The morning after their conversation, if you could even call it that, Paul left the house with a single black duffel bag and a box under his arm. "I'll handle the rest soon," he said. She expected that to mean a few weeks of awkward hallway encounters. Maybe an argument over who gets the Vitamix, some kind of emotional debris field. But when she came home from Pilates the next day, there was nothing. No cologne lingering in the bathroom. No shaving kit, no phone chargers, no stray receipts, no last-minute, "oh, I forgot this" texts. Just cold, surgical absence. He even took the plunger from his side of the garage workbench. She wandered from room to room like she was looking for evidence of a crime, some sign he had slipped, left a note, a grudge, a dent in the drywall. But no. Paul left the house the same way you uninstall an app. No drama, no warning, no residue. Even the shared Google Calendar was wiped vacant, like their entire marriage had been a placeholder. She sat on the edge of the bed that night, staring at the space where his charging dock used to be, chewing the inside of her cheek. Not sad, not angry, just unsettled. She checked his LinkedIn. Still active. Same job, same profile photo. No new connections. She checked his email, their old shared grocery list app, his Amazon account. Logged out. He didn't even leave behind a toothbrush. But here's what truly unnerved her. In the attic, tucked behind one of the storage bins, she found a dusty old laptop, Paul's first MacBook, the one she thought he threw out 6 years ago. She turned it on. Password still worked. Empty. No files, no documents, no photos. Just a single note in the trash folder, written months ago. Some people don't burn bridges. They build exits. That was when her stomach turned. This wasn't emotional, it wasn't impulsive. Paul had planned this, and he didn't tell anyone, not even her, especially not her. Because Paul always did one thing better than anyone else: disappear when it mattered most. It started with brunch. Because, of course it did. Alyssa sat across from Jessica at that overpriced spot downtown with the fake rustic walls and $18 eggs. She was mid-rant about Paul's Houdini act, how he ghosted the house, ghosted the cat, ghosted her, when Jessica set her mimosa down a little too gently. "You know," Jessica said slowly, swirling the glass, "I think I saw him last week." Alyssa's fork paused mid-air. Jessica continued, eyes flicking up cautiously. "He was at Little Clover Wednesday night. I was there with Chad for that work thing. We were sitting near the bar and, yeah, I swear it was him." Alyssa scoffed. "Paul at Little Clover? He hates that place. Says it smells like truffle oil and broken dreams." Jessica smiled thinly. Well, he didn't look like he hated it. She picked up her phone, tapped a few times, and slid it across the table. Alyssa leaned in, and there he was, Paul in a navy blazer she didn't recognize, leaning forward across a candlelit table, laughing, and across from him, some woman, blonde, stylish, mid-40s but glowing like she had time to sleep and the self-esteem to mean it. They weren't touching, nothing, explicit, but Alyssa knew that look, the way her fingers curled lightly around her wine glass, the way Paul tilted his head when he listened. It wasn't a first date kind of posture. It was easy, familiar, worse, intimate. Alyssa handed the phone back too quickly, like it was hot. He's probably just networking. She could be someone from work. Jessica raised an eyebrow. "Didn't you say he works remote? I mean, maybe they're working on something." Jessica didn't argue. She didn't have to. That was the problem. Alyssa tried to push the image out of her mind for the rest of the day. But later, back home, she pulled up Paul's old email account, the one still connected to her iPad by accident. She hadn't checked it in weeks. Nothing. No flights, no dinners, no obvious trails. But under starred, a file titled Elmwood Lease Agreement, dated 2 months ago. Elmwood was a high-end building in the Arts District. She opened a new tab and searched floor plans, modern loft style, hardwood floors, big windows. Way too nice for a man who used to swear by Costco furniture and say throw pillows were a scam. Something twisted in her stomach, sharp and slow. He didn't just move on, he upgraded. And he did it without asking for permission, without the guilt, without her. That night, she poured herself a second glass of wine and re-watched that blurry photo in her memory, frame by frame. Not because she cared, but because for the first time she wasn't sure he ever did. The first thing she noticed was the scent, clean linen, a hint of cedar. Subtle but expensive, like the kind of hotel that doesn't advertise online. Not the usual bachelor pad stench of gym socks and despair she'd quietly hoped for. The doorman greeted her by name. "Mr. Halpern said you might stop by," he said politely, buzzed her up without asking questions. Her heels clicked on polished marble floors. The elevator didn't creak. No weird smells, no cluttered bulletin boards, just quiet, curated elegance. She expected a shoebox or something, trying way too hard to look new money. Instead, Paul's apartment was precise, open space, soft lighting, framed prints, not generic IKEA stuff, but actual art. A black leather couch, a real record player. No piles of unopened mail, no sad leftovers rotting in the fridge. He had plants, and they were alive. She hated that she wanted a little, just enough to pretend she wasn't impressed. Then she saw the built-in bookshelf lined with hardcovers, spines uncracked, arranged alphabetically. Her eyes landed on a small marble dish near the entry table. Inside, a single brass key, a hotel key card tucked behind it, and a delicate gold earring. Alyssa froze. It wasn't hers, and it sure as hell wasn't random. Just then she heard a soft laugh from the balcony. She turned. And there she was, the woman from the photo. Up close she was worse. Not a 25-year-old Instagram decoy. No, she was seasoned, poised. The kind of woman who knew what to say in a boardroom and what to ignore at brunch. Simple silver jewelry, cream blouse, red wine in hand. She looked comfortable here, comfortable with him. Paul followed her in, 2 glasses in one hand, relaxed in a navy sweater Alyssa had never seen. His eyes flicked to Alyssa just once. No surprise, no awkwardness. "Didn't expect you this early," he said, setting the glasses down. Alyssa's throat dried. "I was in the neighborhood." He nodded. No invitation to sit, no small talk. He wasn't being rude, he was being indifferent. She glanced back at the woman, who was now politely pretending to scroll through something on her phone. No tension, no performance, just calm. The 3 of them stood there in quiet, and for the first time in years, Alyssa felt like the extra person in the room. Not the host, not the center, just someone outside the orbit. It hit her hard and fast. He didn't just move on. He fit here, in this life, with that woman, in this clean, sharp, modern silence. And worst of all, he looked good. Not younger, not fake happy. He looked light, like someone who took off a heavy coat he didn't know he'd been wearing for years. Alyssa turned to leave before her voice cracked. She didn't say goodbye, didn't want to risk hearing him not say it back. She stared at the message for 17 minutes before hitting send. "Can we talk?" Not "hey," not "how are you," not "I was just thinking." Just 3 words. Clean, measured, strategic. She expected him to take the bait, maybe ask if she was okay, maybe throw her a breadcrumb of curiosity. Instead, his reply came within 2 minutes. About what? That was it. No period, no emojis, no question mark. Just those 2 words. Surgical, cold, bulletproof. She sat back, phone in hand, heart quietly climbing up her throat. She tried not to take it personally, but it was impossible not to. This was a man who used to write her birthday cards in full paragraphs, who once cried watching a Pixar movie, who proposed to her with a nervous stutter and a goddamn poem. Now he gave her the kind of reply you send to a telemarketer. She typed, deleted, typed again. "I just thought maybe we could clear the air." Send. A full hour passed. Nothing. She opened Instagram, scrolled, refreshed, checked his feed. Still private, no new posts. But his profile picture was different now. An updated photo, new suit, confident tilt to his chin. She zoomed in, studied the woman in the blurry reflection of his sunglasses. Same blonde, same perfect posture. The little vein in her temple started to throb. The read receipt blinked into existence at 9:43 p.m. Then his response came. "I think everything's pretty clear already." She stared at it. The audacity. The control. It was like trying to argue with a therapist who had already diagnosed you and moved on. There was no hook to latch onto, no emotional bait, just clean, clinical distance. Paul had always been even-keeled, but this wasn't calm, this was done, not out of spite, out of evolution. And suddenly Alyssa realized he didn't walk away because he was hurt. He walked away because he finally understood he could. And now he didn't need anything from her. Not answers, not closure, not permission. Not her. She told herself it was just a drive. No agenda, no plan. Just some quiet night air and the hum of the city to clear her head. Maybe circle the block. Maybe see if the lights in his unit were on. But when she pulled up to the building, headlights washing over the pristine entrance and polished brass awning, she cut the engine, sat there, heart ticking. Then she got out, walked up to the glass doors like she still belonged in places like this. The concierge looked up. Name? She hesitated. Her voice came out thinner than she expected. Alyssa Halpern. Do you have an appointment? I'm his wife, she said, then winced. Ex-wife. He raised an eyebrow, picked up the phone. She heard the low murmur of the call, then saw the man nod. You're clear. Penthouse. Elevator to the right. He let her in. That alone unsettled her. Paul had no reason to, no obligation, which meant one of two things: he was feeling generous, or he wanted her to see something. The ride up was silent. She watched the numbers tick. Her reflection stared back in the brushed metal of the elevator walls, eyes sharp, lipstick too red, jacket buttoned wrong. The door opened. She stepped out into warm light and faint jazz. And then there they were. Across the open-plan living room, just inside the kitchen nook. Paul stood barefoot in dark slacks, rolling up his sleeves as he poured wine into 2 glasses. The woman stood beside him at the stove, laughing softly, something aromatic simmering in a copper pot. Her hand brushed his shoulder, familiar, natural, like she'd done it 100 times. Neither of them saw Alyssa at first. She stepped forward. Paul turned. His eyes met hers, steady. No surprise. No welcome either. Wasn't expecting you tonight, he said. His voice was even, almost amused. Alyssa's mouth opened, but no sound came. She hadn't prepared for this, for them to be in the middle of something so intimate, so casual, so unbothered. I just thought we could talk, she managed, eyes flicking to the woman, who was now watching silently, wineglass in hand, with the cool patience of someone who has never had to beg. Paul didn't move. Well, he said, we're in the middle of dinner. Alyssa blinked. She felt the blood rise in her neck. The humiliation was so sharp it nearly knocked the air out of her. Maybe you could step outside for a minute, she asked, desperate to claw back even 1 inch of control. Paul tilted his head slightly. I could, he said, but I don't want to. That landed like a punch. The woman raised her glass. Would you like some wine? She asked, not mockingly. Worse, genuinely, like this was her home, like Alyssa was the stranger. I won't stay, Alyssa said quickly. I needed to see you. Paul nodded once. Well, now you have. Then turned back to the stove. And just like that, she was background noise in a life she used to own. The table was already set. When she walked farther in, a single taper candle flickered between 2 linen napkins folded with a precision she never bothered with. Wine glasses sparkled. Real plates, ceramic, heavy, elegant, were placed perfectly across from each other, not the chipped stoneware they'd used for years. The playlist in the background, soft, jazzy, curated, not Paul's usual lazy Spotify shuffle. This wasn't an accident. It was a stage. And she was walking right into the scene after the curtain had already gone up. Paul glanced over his shoulder, catching her still hovering near the threshold like a waitress who'd wandered too close to a private table. He didn't stop pouring the wine, didn't rush, just finished the pour with a quiet swirl and said, with perfect poise, sorry, we already started. That sentence. She felt it in her teeth. Not you're interrupting, not let's talk later, just you're not part of this. The woman turned slightly in her chair, graceful, her posture calm and composed. No surprise, no discomfort, just mild interest, like she was observing a piece of forgotten furniture someone dragged into the room. Alyssa didn't sit. There was no invitation. She hovered, locked in place, an overdressed ghost at a table where no one remembered she once belonged. Paul took his seat across from the woman, raised his glass and smiled. To Thursday nights. To Thursday nights, she echoed, clinking her glass gently against his. Alyssa's hands twitched. She almost spoke, almost lunged into some rambling, angry monologue about how fast this all was, how wrong it looked, how inappropriate, how suspicious, how calculated. But there was nowhere to wedge that emotion. No room, no script. This wasn't some petty rebound or fragile game of spite. This was their routine now. She watched Paul break off a piece of warm baguette, offer it to the woman like it was second nature. He hadn't looked at Alyssa again. And that hurt more than anything. The worst part wasn't the silence. It was how complete it felt without her. "You moved on this fast." Alyssa's voice cracked, sharper than she meant, slicing through the jazz and the soft clinking of silverware. Her arms were crossed, jaw clenched, that mix of fury and disbelief boiling under her skin like acid. Paul glanced up from his plate, barely lifting his fork. "You ended it fast," he said. His eyes held hers for half a second. Then, just like that, drifted back to his risotto. Like she'd asked if he wanted more salt. The woman across from him tilted her head slightly, eyes flicking between them, puzzled. Her tone wasn't mocking, just honest. "Sorry." "Who is she?" The words hit like a slap. Not ex-wife. Not Alyssa. Not the mother of his children. Just who? Alyssa blinked, took half a step back. Paul didn't answer, didn't introduce her, didn't clarify, just kept eating, like the question had no urgency, like Alyssa wasn't even worth the footnote. She wanted to scream, to throw something, to grab that beautiful glass of Pinot and hurl it against the perfect wall, to demand recognition, closure, something. But all she could do was stand there, burning. "You really erased me this easily," she snapped. Paul finally looked up again, calm as ever. "I didn't erase you," he said. "You just stopped being relevant to this chapter." The woman raised an eyebrow, half impressed, half curious, like she just watched someone cut a wire without flinching. Alyssa opened her mouth, but nothing came out. Paul turned back to his guest, smiled, and said, "Anyway, you were telling me about that Napa deal." And just like that, the page turned. And she wasn't in the story anymore. She waited in the hallway like a schoolgirl outside the principal's office, clutching her purse with both hands like it might hold dignity instead of receipts and chapstick. He came out 10 minutes later, after walking his guest to the elevator. Didn't rush, didn't apologize. He just leaned against the doorframe, arms crossed, watching her like a mildly inconvenient delivery. "I just want to ask you one thing," she said, not quite looking him in the eye. Paul said nothing, just waited. "Did you ever love me?" It came out quieter than she intended, less accusation or plea, a whisper of something she hadn't admitted to herself until that second. He didn't scoff, didn't smirk. He just let the silence breathe for a few long moments, then said, "I did, until you didn't." Simple, precise, no venom, no poetry. It was the kind of sentence you don't recover from, not because it's cruel, but because it's true. Alyssa felt something crack in her ribs, subtle, internal, like the last piece of a house collapsing long after the fire's out. "I didn't stop," she murmured. Paul raised an eyebrow. "You just forgot what it looked like." He stepped aside, gently motioning toward the elevator. Not rudely, just finished. She stood there for a second longer, searching for anything, an echo of warmth, a flicker of regret, even a final insult. But there was nothing left in him for her. Not hatred, not grief, just space. And he wasn't giving it up. She didn't say goodbye, didn't ask for a hug, didn't slam the door or throw one last grenade, didn't cry. Not here, not in front of him. She just turned, one slow pivot in heels that suddenly felt 2 sizes too tight. Her hand brushed the doorframe for balance. A reflex. Paul stood still, backlit by warm light and the faint sound of jazz still playing in the background. He didn't move, didn't offer a parting word. Just watched her leave with the kind of expression you wear when a meeting ends and you already know what comes next. She stepped into the hallway. The door didn't close immediately, it waited. She didn't look back. And then, click, the soft finality of the latch sliding home. It wasn't dramatic, it didn't echo, it didn't cry. It just was. A sound that told her, unmistakably, that was it. Not a pause, not a timeout, not a fight he'd come back from in 3 days. A finish. She stood there in the silent corridor of the high-rise, the kind that smells like money and polished wood, feeling like a stranger in a movie that used to be hers. No one followed her out, no one called after her. Even the elevator took its time arriving, as if the building itself wasn't in any rush to let her escape the moment. When it finally opened, she stepped in, pressed the button, watched the numbers descend, and realized something brutal in its simplicity. He didn't lose anything tonight. She did, and he didn't even have to raise his voice. The house was too quiet, not serene, not peaceful, just silent in that way that made every faucet drip sound like a scream. Alyssa sat in the kitchen at the same table where Paul used to read the paper with 2 sugars in his coffee and one eye on the market, the table he built with his own hands when they first bought this house, back when they still touched each other without effort. Now its surface was spotless, not clean, sterile. She opened her laptop, mostly out of habit. No new emails, no dinner invites. A calendar alert for an anniversary that didn't matter anymore blinked at her like a cruel joke. Then she clicked on Facebook. She didn't know why. The photo was at the top of her feed, bright, effortless, a little too perfect for real life, but somehow still believable. Paul and her, the woman, standing on a sunlit terrace with wine glasses in hand, smiling like they belonged in an ad for a life insurance policy you'd never need. No wedding rings, no declarations. Just the kind of casual intimacy that comes from knowing neither of you is pretending. The caption was short. Sometimes peace starts where begging ends. Alyssa stared at it. No tags, no grandstanding. But she knew that caption was meant for her. Not in a petty way, not to gloat, but as a statement. And that's when it landed. Full force. Irrevocable. This wasn't just Paul moving on. This was Paul healing. Thriving even. And she hadn't been part of that process. Hadn't even been invited. The screen glowed in the dark kitchen for another 30 seconds before she closed the lid. She didn't cry. Didn't rage. Just sat there alone in the perfect quiet she once craved, finally understanding what it meant to win the argument and lose the war.